What if the cartoons you thought you left in the past still had the power to surprise you? The 1990s were packed with wild ideas, strange mascots, and shows that went bigger and louder than anything before. Some became classics, others disappeared before you even realized they aired. But here's the twist. The forgotten ones often hold the most nostalgic punch. Buckle up, because hidden inside this countdown are shows you didn't know you remembered. Captain Planet and the Planeteers. Earth, Fire, Wind, Water, Heart. Do those words spark a memory? For many kids in the early 1990s, Captain Planet and the Planeteers wasn't just another Saturday cartoon. It was an entire movement wrapped in bright animation. 5 teens from different parts of the world each carried a magical ring, and when their powers combined, they summoned Captain Planet, a blue-skinned eco-hero with a green mullet that looked straight out of a pop concert. But here's what made it different. The villains weren't space aliens or random monsters. They were greedy businessmen and careless polluters. Hogish, Greedly, and Luton Plunder weren't just goofy names. They were stand-ins for real-world problems. The show's real hook wasn't Captain Planet swooping in. It was the constant reminder. The power is yours. The message was clear. Saving the Earth was up to you. The show also had star power. Whoopi Goldberg and LeVar Burton lent their voices, giving it credibility beyond the usual cartoon fare. And that theme song, once it got stuck in your head, it never left. So why did it fade? Some thought it was too preachy, others just wanted more action. Still, for kids who shouted, "Go Planet!" on the playground, this series was unforgettable. It wasn't just a cartoon, it was a call to care. Street sharks. Sharks in jeans riding motorcycles. How much more 90s can you get? Street Sharks burst onto the screen in 1994 with a concept so over the top, it somehow worked. 4 brothers were transformed into half-shark hybrids after a lab experiment went wrong, turning them into muscle-packed heroes with chomping jaws and wild catchphrases. Each shark had a distinct personality. Ripster led the pack, Jab was the boxing powerhouse, Streaks chased thrills, and Big Slamu had raw strength. Their nemesis, Dr. Paradigm, constantly cooked up schemes, giving the brothers reason to bite through steel tunnel, under streets, or rollerblade into chaos. The show embodied everything extreme about the decade. Loud, fast, and unapologetically wild. And then there were the toys, giant rubbery action figures with moving jaws that became playground currency. If you didn't own at least one, you knew someone who did. Critics often dismissed it as a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles knockoff. And yes, the formula was similar. But Street Sharks had its own absurd edge, leaning into sheer spectacle. Whether you loved it or laughed at it, the show defined mid-90s cartoon excess. So were the Street Sharks pioneers of cool or simply riding the wave of turtle mania. Either way, they left bite marks on pop culture that never really healed. Mighty Max. Not every hero was a muscle-bound giant. Sometimes he was just a kid with a baseball cap. In 1993, Mighty Max gave audiences a sarcastic, wisecracking teenager who suddenly discovered he was the cap-bearer destined to fight ancient evil across time and space. His allies? Virgil, a scholarly bird-like mentor, and Norman, a Viking warrior built like a tank. Together they chased down Skullmaster, a villain who could give nightmares to even the toughest viewers. Unlike many kid shows, the tone here leaned darker. Characters faced real stakes, sacrifices were made, and danger felt permanent. The show also tied into one of the coolest toy lines of the decade. The Mighty Max playsets were pocket-sized worlds filled with monsters, traps, and hidden surprises. You could carry an entire adventure in your pocket, open it up, and suddenly you were in Max's shoes. What kept the series special was its willingness to get serious. One episode could be full of jokes, the next would explore destiny, fear, or loss. That balance made it unforgettable for those who watched. Mighty Max didn't last long, and its darker style may have scared off younger kids. But for fans, Max's adventures through portals and across dimensions remain burned into memory. Sometimes the smallest hero carries the biggest weight. The Bots Master. What if robots weren't just machines but your closest friends? The Bots Master asked that question in 1993 and answered it with a flashy mix of humor, futuristic action, and tech-savvy charm. The story followed Ziv Zoolander ZZ for short, a teenage inventor who created a squad of sentient bots. Each bot had a quirk. Jam liked to DJ de Nerd was the tech brain, and Cook served up literal food fights. Together they battled the shady mega-corporation called the Corp, whose evil plans always seemed one step away from winning. What really made the show stand out was its attempt to bring three-dimensional effects into the living room. Kids who bought the toys got special glasses that made action sequences pop off the screen. It wasn't perfect, but in the early 90s it felt like a glimpse into the future. The humor also worked in its favor. The banter between ZZ and his bots had energy, making them feel like a genuine team rather than background sidekicks, and the villains led by the hammy Dr. Hiss leaned into campy fun. Despite its ambition, the show never found a huge audience and faded fast. Still, for those who remember rocking those 3D glasses, the Bots Master was a strange but lovable gem. It proved that sometimes the weirdest experiments leave the best impressions. Exo Squad. In the early 90s, one cartoon dared to treat kids like adults. Exo Squad premiered in 1993 and stunned viewers with its mix of deep storytelling, complex characters, and a war story that felt straight out of a science fiction novel. Set in a future where humans built exoframes, mechanized suits used for labor and combat, the show followed the fight between humanity and their genetically engineered servants, the Neo-Sapiens, who rebelled for freedom. What started as a simple good versus evil setup quickly evolved into something far more nuanced. Each character had depth. J.T. Marsh, Nara Burns, and Wolf Bronsky weren't just soldiers. They were people with fears, loyalties, and moral conflicts. The show tackled issues like prejudice, war ethics, and the cost of freedom, topics almost unheard of in Saturday morning animation. The battles were thrilling, but Exo Squad's emotional core made it unforgettable. Characters were injured, sacrifices were made, and the consequences were real. It didn't talk down to its audience, it trusted kids to handle heavy themes. While it earned critical praise, Exo Squad struggled with ratings and was cut short before its story could fully conclude. Yet fans still hail it as one of the smartest animated series of its time. For those who remember, Exo Squad wasn't just another action cartoon, it was proof that even animated heroes could face the same tough questions as the real world. Biker Mice from Mars. Imagine a trio of alien rodents riding motorcycles across Earth, blasting villains with style. That was Biker Mice from Mars, one of the strangest yet coolest imports of the 1990s. The show followed Throttle Moto and Vinny, three mice who escaped their war-torn home planet and landed in Chicago. Instead of hiding in the shadows, these bikers turned into full-blown heroes, defending Earth against the Plutarchians, a greedy race of fish-like aliens bent on stripping planets of resources. The trio's motorcycles weren't just bikes. They were high-tech extensions of their personalities packed with gadgets and flair. The appeal was undeniable. Throttle had that calm leader vibe, Moto was the gentle giant with a mechanical arm, and Vinny was the hotshot daredevil who loved himself almost as much as his bike. Together they made intergalactic cool look effortless. The show leaned into its rock and roll attitude. The one-liners were sharp, the action sequences loud, and the character designs pure 90s excess. And of course, like every successful cartoon, the toys were everywhere. Fans could ride along at home with their own miniature biker mice. While critics shrugged it off as another Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles clone. Biker Mice from Mars had its own identity fueled by its irreverent style and unapologetic energy. For kids who tuned in, it was more than rodents on bikes. It was rebellion on Saturday mornings. Denver, the Last Dinosaur. He's your friend, and a whole lot more. That line from the theme song is probably stuck in your head if you ever saw Denver, the Last Dinosaur. Though it first appeared in the late 80s, reruns throughout the 90s made it a cult favorite for a new generation of kids. The show centered on a group of California teens who accidentally hatched Denver, a goofy but lovable green dinosaur, who quickly became their companion. From skateboarding to strumming a guitar, Denver wasn't just prehistoric. He was the ultimate 90s cool kid. What gave the series its heart was the friendship between the kids and Denver. They constantly protected him from adults who wanted to exploit him, whether it was greedy scientists or shady showmen. The kids in turn learned lessons about teamwork, kindness, and responsibility, all wrapped in slapstick comedy and catchy tunes. Denver stood out because it blended dinosaur fascination with modern-day fun. By the early 90s, dinosaurs were everywhere in pop culture, but Denver felt like a friend rather than a monster. While the show never had the staying power of bigger franchises, it left a strong impression. Fans still hum the theme song decades later, and Denver remains the dinosaur buddy every kid secretly wished they had. Double Dragon. Before video game adaptations became a gamble, Double Dragon tried its luck as a cartoon. Inspired by the arcade, the 1993 series expanded on the story of Billy and Jimmy Lee martial arts brothers sworn to protect their city. Instead of simply rehashing the game, the cartoon gave the brothers mystical powers linked to the dragon. Their biggest challenge was the sinister Shadow Master, whose constant schemes pushed them into action-packed battles that mixed street brawls with fantasy. The animation leaned into fast-paced choreography. Punches, kicks, energy blasts, it all had that arcade flair brought to life on screen. For kids who played the games, watching Billy and Jimmy on Saturday mornings felt like a dream crossover. The show also built out a world beyond the dojo. Mentors, allies, and quirky villains gave depth to the franchise. It wasn't Shakespeare, but it gave fans just enough backstory to feel like the characters had real stakes. Though short-lived Double Dragon did something important. It showed that video games could jump to television and find an audience. Sure, it didn't match the success of its source material, but for kids who shouted, "Dragon Whirlwind!" in the backyard, it was unforgettable. SWAT Kats. The Radical Squadron. 2 ex-pilots, 1 souped-up jet, and a city crawling with villains. That was SWAT Kats. The Radical Squadron. A cult hit from 1993 that felt more like an action movie than a Saturday cartoon. Chance T-Bone Furlong and Jake Razor Clausen were once part of the Enforcers, their city's police force. After being unfairly kicked out, they built the Turbo Cat, a jet packed with gadgets and style, and became vigilantes defending Megacat City. The aerial battles were the show's signature. Dogfights ripped across the screen with stunning animation rivaling what you'd see in theaters. And the villains? From the slimy Dr. Viper to the supernatural Past Master, each had a distinct design that made them instantly memorable. Kids loved the tech. The TurboCat wasn't just a plane, it was a star in its own right, filled with missiles, grappling lines, and transformations that made every showdown unpredictable. Despite its strong fan-following, budget cuts grounded the show after only 2 seasons. But the cult status remains, with fans still campaigning for a revival. For many, SWAT Kats proved that Saturday mornings could deliver blockbuster thrills. The Pirates of Dark Water. High seas adventure meets fantasy epic. The Pirates of Dark Water, which launched in 1991, was one of the boldest animated projects of the decade. Instead of simple one-off episodes, it told a serialized story, a rarity for the time. Prince Ren, joined by warrior Tula, pirate Eos, and the quirky monkeybird Niddler, set out to collect 13 treasures that could banish the deadly dark water spreading across his world. Each episode built on the last, pulling viewers deeper into a sprawling quest. The world-building was rich. Exotic islands, terrifying creatures, and massive ships gave the show a cinematic feel. The villains, especially the ruthless pirate Bloth, made the stakes feel high. Unlike most Saturday morning fluff, the tone here was darker, filled with sacrifice and moral choices. Fans loved its ambition, but that ambition may have been its downfall. The show was expensive to produce and ended before Ren's quest was finished, leaving the story incomplete. Even so, The Pirates of Dark Water is remembered as one of the most original cartoons of its era. For those who tuned in, it wasn't just another cartoon, it was an adventure that dared to go deeper. Reboot. What if your Saturday morning adventure took place inside a computer? In 1994, Reboot became the first fully computer-animated TV series dropping kids straight into a digital world called Mainframe. It wasn't just flashy, it was groundbreaking. The story followed Bob, a guardian, whose job was to protect Mainframe from dangerous viruses like Megabyte and Hexadecimal. Alongside Dot Matrix Enzo and their dog Frisket, Bob dove into games that dropped whole sections of the city into virtual battles. Win and the city survived. Lose and everything was wiped out. What made Reboot unforgettable wasn't just the cutting-edge CGI, it was the heart. Characters grew changed and sometimes paid heavy prices. Enzo's transformation into the hardened warrior Matrix was one of the most dramatic character arcs of any 90s cartoon. The humor balanced the darker tone with constant winks to pop culture and sly references only adults caught. And while the early graphics look clunky today back then, it felt like stepping into the future. Though its run was uneven, Reboot proved that CGI could carry a series. It paved the way for everything from Beast Wars to Star Wars, the Clone Wars. For kids in the mid-90s, it was the show that turned the inside of a computer into a world worth saving. Skeleton Warriors. What if your villains were scarier than your heroes? In 1994, Skeleton Warriors hit the airwaves with a gothic vibe that was darker than most kids expected. The plot centered on the Legion of Light heroes sworn to protect the mystical Lightstar Crystal. Their enemy? Baron Dark, a power-hungry villain who stole part of the crystal and transformed himself and his followers into living skeletons. The result was a war between bone-clad nightmares and a family of brave but outnumbered defenders. The visuals were striking. The skeletal designs were detailed and eerie, while the futuristic dystopian setting gave the series a heavy metal edge. And unlike most toy-driven cartoons, the stakes felt high. Every clash was about more than winning. It was about survival. Of course, toys were part of the package. Glow-in-the-dark action figures captured the eerie style of the show, making Skeleton Warriors a must-have for kids who loved creepy aesthetics. The downside? It lasted only one season. But its gothic tone and unique villain designs left a strong cult following. For those who saw it, Skeleton Warriors wasn't just another battle of good versus evil, it was a fight that felt genuinely dangerous. Extreme Ghostbusters. How do you reboot a classic without losing the spark? In 1997, Extreme Ghostbusters tried, and for many fans, it succeeded. The series followed Egon Spengler, the last original Ghostbuster, as he trained a new group of college-age recruits. Kylie was the goth expert in the occult. Garrett was a thrill-seeker, Roland was the brains, and Eduardo was the sarcastic skeptic. Together they busted ghosts across New York, facing scarier and more intense spirits than the original team ever tackled. What set it apart was its darker tone. The ghosts were creepier, the stakes higher, and the themes more mature. Yet it still carried the heart and humor of the franchise. The proton packs, redesigned with sleeker looks, gave fans something fresh without betraying the original. The diversity of the new team reflected the times. Each member brought unique skills and flaws, making them relatable to a new generation of viewers. Though it only lasted one season, Extreme Ghostbusters proved the franchise had life beyond the classic quartet. For kids in the late 90s, it was their gateway into the ghost-busting world, blending nostalgia with a modern edge. The Tick. Evil beware, we have waffles. If you remember that line, you probably loved The Tick, the superhero parody that aired in 1994. The Tick wasn't your typical caped crusader. Clueless, overly dramatic, and endlessly optimistic, he patrolled the city with his nervous sidekick Arthur, an ex-accountant in a moth suit. Together they faced villains so absurd they bordered on genius. Chairface Chippendale, the Midnight Bomber, and Sewer Urchin, to name just a few. What made the show shine was its satire. It poked fun at every superhero trope imaginable, from corny origin stories to overblown speeches. The Tick's booming voice and Arthur's constant exasperation created comedy gold. Beyond laughs, The Tick stood out for its creativity. Each episode was unpredictable, jumping from over-the-top battles to complete nonsense. Yet somehow it worked, though it ended too soon. The Tick became a cult classic, later inspiring live-action adaptations. For fans, it wasn't just parody. It was proof that sometimes the best way to celebrate superheroes is by laughing at them. Mummies Alive. Ancient mummies as superheroes? Only in the 90s. In 1997, Mummies Alive arrived with a premise so wild it could only have come from that era. The show followed Presley Carnarvon, a modern boy revealed to be the reincarnation of an Egyptian pharaoh. Protecting him were 4 resurrected mummies, Jakal Rath Arman and Nefertina, each equipped with mystical armor and powers tied to their ancient roles. Together they fought against Scarab, a sorcerer determined to steal Presley's life force. Every transformation scene was a highlight. The mummies shouted their catchphrases, armor locked into place, and suddenly ancient warriors clashed with modern evil. The designs were colorful, mixing Egyptian motifs with futuristic flair. The series balanced action with humor. Presley often acted like any other kid, grounding the story in relatable moments, while the mummies adjusted awkwardly to modern life. Though it lasted only one season, Mummies Alive made its mark. It introduced kids to Egyptian themes while delivering high-energy battles and memorable characters. For many, it was proof that in the 90s, no idea was too strange to turn into a Saturday morning adventure. Big Bad Beetleborgs. What if your favorite comic book heroes suddenly came to life? That was the wild premise of Big Bad Beetleborgs, which stormed onto screens in 1996. 3 kids, Drew, Joe, and Roland, wandered into a haunted house and accidentally freed Flabber, a goofy, Elvis-inspired ghost. As a reward, he granted them the ability to transform into the armored Beetleborgs, straight out of their favorite comic book. But here was the twist. Not only did the heroes come alive, so did the villains. The result? A mashup of superhero action slapstick comedy and monster hijinks. The haunted house itself was full of colorful gags with resident creatures like werewolves and vampires who acted more like sitcom neighbors than menacing threats. What gave the show its edge was its mix of campy humor and flashy armor. The Beetleborg suits were pure 90s spectacle, gleaming metal, oversized gadgets, and endless special effects. And while it was often compared to Power Rangers, Beetleborgs had a quirkier personality that set it apart. Though its run was short, the show carved out a fan base. For kids who dreamed of stepping inside their comics, Big Bad Beetleborgs made that fantasy real ghost sidekick and all. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. What if your biggest enemy wasn't a monster but your salad? In 1990 Attack of the Killer, Tomatoes turned a cult comedy film into one of the strangest Saturday morning cartoons ever. The plot followed young Chad Finletter and his friends as they battled against the evil Dr. Gangrene, who created mutant tomatoes bent on taking over the world. Helping Chad was Tara, a tomato, who transformed into a human, giving the show an even weirder twist. The tomatoes weren't just oversized fruit, they had personalities. Some were menacing, others bumbling, and all completely absurd. Episodes leaned into parody, with characters breaking the fourth wall and poking fun at themselves. What made the show unforgettable was its self-awareness. It didn't take itself seriously for a second. The humor was offbeat, the pacing chaotic, and the theme song. Once you heard it, it never left your brain. It didn't last long, but Attack of the Killer Tomatoes holds a special place in 90s nostalgia. For kids who saw it, nothing was funnier than the idea of a tomato uprising. Earthworm Jim. A worm in a supersuit? Only the 90s could pull that off. Based on the hit video game Earthworm Jim, hit TV screens in 1995 with a blend of manic humor and surreal action. Jim was just an ordinary earthworm until a robotic suit fell from space and turned him into a superhero. Along with his sidekick, Peter Puppy, he took on villains with names as ridiculous as their designs, like Evil the Cat and Queen Slug for a Butt. The show reveled in nonsense. Episodes leapt from slapstick gags to bizarre wordplay, often breaking logic altogether. Yet that chaotic energy was its charm. Jim's over-the-top personality combined with Peter's tendency to transform into a raging beast kept the comedy flowing. The animation captured the zany style of the games, bright and bold with exaggerated movements. For kids who played the video game, the cartoon felt like a natural extension, wild, unpredictable, and funny in all the right ways, though short-lived Earthworm Jim became a cult classic. For fans, it wasn't about the story. It was about the ride, one absurd joke at a time. The Adventures of T-Rex. Dinosaurs in suits running a nightclub by day, fighting crime by night. If that sounds too bizarre to be true, welcome to The Adventures of T-Rex. Premiering in 1992. This show was as odd as it gets. The series followed 5 dinosaur brothers, Bernie Bruno, Bubba Buck, and Bugsy, who used their comedy club as a front for their crime-fighting alter egos. Each donned a high-tech suit, transforming from entertainers to heroes battling Big Boss Graves and his gang of criminal dinosaurs. The style mixed slapstick humor with gangster drama. One minute the T-Rex brothers were cracking jokes on stage, the next they were diving into neon-lit battles. The contrast made the show stand out, even if it confused adults who couldn't figure out who it was for. While it didn't last long, the show had undeniable flair. The jazzy nightclub setting, flashy suits, and unique blend of crime noir with cartoon absurdity gave it a personality unlike anything else on TV. The Adventures of T-Rex may not have topped ratings, but it proved one thing. In the 90s, no idea was too strange to animate. Freakazoid. Imagine a superhero powered by internet chaos, and you've got Freakazoid. Premiering in 1995, this series was one of the zaniest, most unpredictable cartoons of the decade. Dexter Douglas was a regular computer geek until an accident zapped him into cyberspace, transforming him into Freakazoid, a hyperactive hero who could bend reality, break the fourth wall, and leap into any gag at lightning speed. The villains matched the madness. The Lobe Candle Jack and Cave Guy were as ridiculous as their names, giving Freakazoid endless opportunities for absurd showdowns. The series constantly parodied superhero tropes, tossing in pop culture jokes and nonsensical tangents that left viewers laughing and confused in equal measure. What made it brilliant was its dual appeal. Kids loved the slapstick and goofy energy, while adults picked up on the clever writing and sly references. It was chaotic, but never lazy. Though it only ran for 2 seasons, Freakazoid became a cult favorite, remembered as one of the funniest superhero parodies ever made. For anyone who watched, the only real challenge was keeping up with the rapid-fire jokes. Widget, the World Watcher. Before Captain Planet took the eco-hero spotlight, there was Widget. Premiering in the early 90s, Widget the World Watcher was all about teaching kids the importance of protecting the environment, but it did so with a purple alien sidekick who could shapeshift into almost anything. Widget traveled to Earth with his robot companion Megabrain, often helping kids stop greedy developers, careless polluters, or villains who threatened nature. The message was simple. Protecting the planet wasn't just the job of superheroes, it was up to everyone. What made Widget stand out was its quirky design. He was small, clumsy, and not exactly cool, but that was part of the charm. Unlike sleek action stars, Widget looked approachable, like a friend you could imagine showing up in your backyard. While it leaned heavily on its lessons, the show's light-hearted tone and Saturday morning energy made the message stick. It may not have had the flash of other cartoons, but for the kids who watched Widget's adventures, left a lasting impression. Project Geeker. What if your hero was a total accident? That's the premise behind Project Geeker, a short-lived but unforgettable series from 1996. The show centered on Geeker, a genetically engineered creation who was supposed to be the ultimate superhero. Instead, due to a programming mishap, he turned out clumsy, goofy, and unpredictable. With his shape-shifting powers running wild, every attempt at heroics turned into comedy. Helping Geeker navigate the world were Lady Macbeth, a tough ex-bounty hunter, and her talking dog, Noah. Together they tried to keep him safe from the sinister organization that wanted him back. What made Project Geeker special was its mix of satire and action. It poked fun at sci-fi cliches while still delivering high-energy chases and battles. The animation was sharp, the humor offbeat, and the tone just strange enough to make it memorable. Though it only lasted one season, its oddball style won over a small but loyal fan base. For those who remember, Geeker proved that sometimes the best heroes are the ones who can't stop messing things up. WildCATS. When comic books exploded in the 90s, cartoons weren't far behind. WildCATS, based on the Image Comics series, tried to bring edgy superhero drama to Saturday mornings in 1994. The team led by Spartan Grifter and Zealot was locked in a war against the Demonites, an alien race hiding on Earth. It had everything you'd expect from a comic adaptation. Flashy powers, larger-than-life battles, and a tone that took itself very seriously. What stood out was the style. WildCATS leaned into sleek designs and dark plots, trying to capture the extreme feel of its comic roots. While other kids' shows went goofy, this one wanted to be taken seriously. The problem? It may have been a little too serious for its own good. The characters looked cool, but didn't always connect emotionally. Still, it gave comic fans a thrill, and for kids who collected the toys, it was a badge of honor. Though it couldn't compete with bigger hits like X-Men, the animated series, WildCATS, still holds a place in the 90s time capsule as a bold attempt to bring darker comics to mainstream TV. Conan the Adventurer. Before Conan was swinging his sword on the big screen, he had a kid-friendly adventure on TV. In 1992, Conan the Adventurer took the barbarian hero and softened him into a Saturday morning champion. This version of Conan wasn't the grim warrior from the movies. Instead, he was a noble hero, fighting to save his family who had been turned to stone by the Serpent Men. With his magical sword, Conan battled the snake sorcerer, Wrath Aemon, and his minions across countless adventures. The show mixed fantasy landscapes with lessons about bravery, loyalty, and friendship. While it toned down the darker edges of the Conan mythos, it still offered plenty of action to keep kids hooked. For many, it was their first introduction to the Conan character. Bright animation, memorable villains, and a catchy theme song made it stand apart from other fantasy cartoons. Though it faded as quickly as it appeared, Conan the Adventurer proved that even sword-swinging heroes could make the jump into kid-friendly storytelling. King Arthur and the Knights of Justice. What if a football team got transported back in time to become medieval knights? That's not a joke, that's the actual premise of King Arthur and the Knights of Justice. Premiering in 1992, the series began with the real King Arthur trapped by the sorceress Morgana. To fill the gap, Merlin summoned a modern-day football team, led by quarterback Arthur King. Suddenly, shoulder pads gave way to shining armor, and a group of athletes had to fight as Camelot's defenders. It was absurd, but that was the fun. The mix of sports team banter with medieval battles created a show that was both ridiculous and entertaining. Each knight had magical armor and weapons, giving the series that toy-friendly edge. Though it only lasted 2 seasons, the concept alone made it unforgettable. For kids who watched, it was proof that in the 90s, no idea was too wild to turn into a cartoon. Football players as knights? Why not? And that's our trip through 25 forgotten cartoons of the 1990s. Some were bold experiments, others pure chaos, but all carried the unmistakable flavor of the decade. Maybe you laughed, maybe you cringed, or maybe you just rediscovered a childhood favorite. Which one hit your memory hardest? Let us know in the comments, share this with a fellow 90s fan, and subscribe for more nostalgia. Because sometimes the shows we almost forgot are the ones worth revisiting.